Good Tuesday to you, everybody in Com 651. Welcome to week boom, bam, 14. You are here. I am here, which means I am back. I have made it back. I'm looking at myself here, not looking as bright eyed and bushy tailed as I would like this morning, which can only mean one thing. Ooh, I am not sufficiently caffeinated. Now we're working on it. But hey, looky. New coffee cup, Toulouse. Hey, cool town in the southwest of France. I'm back from beyond deserts and oceans and such and what. And I've learned over the years as I've gone to places in the world where things are not the happiest. Let's put it that way. I love people. I love new experiences. I love different cultures. But I mean, people are people and places are places. And when you find them at their best, they're at their best. And at times in which things are not good and they're at their worst, then you can't expect them to be at their best. So they're not. So I've learned over the years that when I go to those places, to schedule a little bit of time to go to another place that lets me relax, that is filled with beauty, that's filled with people who are, having happy or at least banal experiences. And this time the stop was in Toulouse, France, which is known for its, you see here on the cup, I don't want to drop this, it's known for its many pink stucco buildings that you find around the town. And I was able to spend time there with my wife as well. So that was a bonus. Okay. So although I'm a little bleary eyed, still jet lag and all that sort of stuff, I'm here. All right, and I'm glad you're here too. Now, although I did not spend time in Canvas while I was away, I did spend time with email and corresponded with some of you about what we're doing here as we approach the end of the semester, because it is week 14. And hey, that means counting this week, we only have 1, 2, 3 more to go, and we're finished. And in fact, this is the last week in which you'll have questions from the readings that you'll need to respond to. Now, I may have some questions for you next week to focus on as part of preparation for the exam, but I won't be requiring you to, post discussions and go back and forth like that. Okay, so what are we going to do today? We're going to talk a little bit about what we're doing this week. We're going to talk a little bit about what you can expect coming up towards the end of the semester. And then we will answer and address questions from week 12. And then later this week, maybe like, Wednesday, Thursday, I will answer questions from week 13, because your final exam, which is coming up, which will be at the end of the semester, will concern itself with, will be drawn from the questions that we've gone over in discussion. All right, so let's get started. So it's week 14, which means we have 3 weeks left. All right, what should you be doing? Number one, you should be focused on that final PR presentation. That is the one in which now, big rollout, drum roll. Here's what you're going to do. Here's what you recommend to pull backcountry's bacon out of the proverbial campfire. All right, so you've done the draft, and I will be looking at those and grading those throughout this week. And I hope, I'll get you some feedback before you have to turn in your final draft, not your actual PR plan instead of just the draft, so you'll have a sense of where you're going. Okay, so you're going to be doing that because that is due at the the end, and oddly enough, this semester ends May 3rd, which is a Saturday, which is weird. So I have yet to set in my mind the date to schedule the exam, but I'm kind of sort of thinking like, like the 30th. That's a Wednesday. Okay, and the way the exam is going to work is as follows. All right, it'll be on Canvas. It's going to be a combination of true false questions, multiple choice questions, short answer questions. All right. It's worth 22% of your grades, like 220 something points. All right. So you want to make sure that you study for it. And you'll get one crack at it. It's not like an assignment that you can jump in and out of. That is, once you start it, you'll get an allotted amount of time, a couple hours, to finish it. And you need to make sure that you're in a place where you're not going to be disturbed and your internet connection's not going to get janked and you're able to get it done, because it's not something that you get to bounce in and out of. Okay, so why don't we say, I'll look at setting it, say started on the 30th. I think you have 24 hours to finish it. And because here's the thing that I'm up against as we move into the end of spring semester. The registrar rides we instructors like circus ponies to get everything graded and all of the marks and the grades into them, because this is graduation. So there are a number of people who, everything's riding on the line, present company excluded, of course. And the registrar's office is just absolutely swamped with stuff to do. And they will not accommodate a pile up of late submissions. So they push down on us pretty hard. And the semester technically ends on Wednesday, that is Saturday, and then I have something like 2-3 days to do everything. Now, there's not a whole lot of people in this class, but this isn't the only class that I'm teaching. So this is just one of the things in the stack. Okay, so I'm thinking we'll have the exam, the 30th to 31st, and then maybe I can have the presentation do a different day on that week, as so they don't conflict with one another for you. All right. If you like that idea, let me know. Send me an email, or if you're like, I don't think so, and we'll get it set. Okay. What I don't want you to do is to worry about things like what dates this and that. I realize that you're scheduling around other things as well. What I would like you to do is to make sure that, if you haven't already, that you begin, reviewing and going back and preparing for the exam by looking at the discussion questions. Which brings me to my next point. As you know, I closed discussion week 1 through 8 after module week. However, I will leave the discussion boards open, the 10 through, where we are now, until, say, the end of week 15. So if you didn't get to any of the questions, get to them now. I'll allow you to do it without any penalty. Don't skip the discussion. You're leaving points on the table. This is easy points for you. And in fact, I find that people that don't do as well as they like in the class, that's because they didn't do the discussions. They let those points slip by. You don't do that. Okay, so if you haven't done it, get in there and do it, because you're going to be getting in there anyway to prepare for the exam. Okay, so for this week, we're going to continue to look at quantitative research, specifically as it relates to causation. Because where quantitative research, in fact, where really any research is concerned, especially in PR, causation is where you want to get to. And what do we mean by that? Well, there's an expression in research that goes, correlation is not causation. Correlation is when two things happen at the same time, but may or may not be causing one another. So, one of the classic illustrations of this goes as follows. In the month of March, in coastal towns in Florida, ice cream sales, the sale of ice cream, rise. In the month of March, in coastal towns in Florida, shark encounters rise. What are we to conclude from that? Well, if you conclude that those who eat ice cream are more attractive and more interesting to sharks, that's the classic mistake. There is a correlation, the rise of ice cream sales and the rise of shark encounters, but is there a causation? That is, that those who get ice cream are more attractive to sharks? Or is there something else going on? Like in March in Florida, there are a lot of spring break people that show up. It's warmer than where they're usually like coming from Ohio or wherever, or Virginia. It's warmer from where they're coming from. They end up on the beach. It's hot in their estimation. They buy ice cream and they also go in the water. Okay. Correlation. Ice cream sales and shark encounters going up. Nothing to tell you that there's a causation. That is, that those who are filled with yummy ice cream are more interesting to sharks. Right? What you're trying to get to as a researcher is causation. That what's causing X to happen. And if you don't do that, if you fail and you get fooled and you mistake correlation for causation, this is where the overwhelming majority of quantitative research, in public relations and everywhere else, goes off the track. Okay, that you go, oh, well, this is happening, and then this happens. So if we do this, then this will happen. So if we stop selling ice cream, people will stop having shark encounters. Well, no, you're just going to have a bunch of drunk, angry spring breakers who can't get their ice cream. Okay, so you're going to be reading about how it is that you determine causation and some of the pitfalls, some of the things to look out for. All right. As of this video, so, I'll post this, and if you see it, I don't think I have the discussion questions up. I will have them up very, very soon. Okay, let's take a look at the questions, excuse me, from last week 12, a couple of weeks back. See what you said, see if we can add anything to it, okay? Give you some feedback and some starting point for the examination. Okay, consider the 6 limitations of quantitative research listed in the article that you read. Of these, which one of the 6 do you believe has the potential to most negatively impact good, informative PR, research, and planning? Briefly explain your selection. Okay, now, this is a question that, is open for your interpretation. And if I reference this discussion item on the exam, it might be something like, which of the following was among the limitations of quantitative research, or which is not a limitation of quantitative research. I'm not going to ask you to tell me again. Maybe I will. I don't know which one is most limiting. Okay, but let's see what you said. Claire, let's take you. Authors lists: limited contextual understanding, restricted complexity, limited flexibility, high cost, analytical rigidity, data dredging as the 6 shortcomings of quantitative research. Limited contextual understanding seems like it could be really damaging in PR research and planning. It seems like many failed PR campaigns could be traced back to this primary issue. I'm thinking about Bud Light here. A good campaign requires a rich understanding of data. Something is poorly interpreted data worse than no data at all. So, okay, I got it. Is poorly interpreted data worse than no data at all? That's an interesting question. That could be a question that might appear on the exam, and the answer to that is yes. That's absolutely true. Why is that true? Well, it's a function of how the human mind works, okay? We are hardwired. We just cannot help ourselves. I mean, there are positives and negatives to what I'm going to tell you in terms of the function of the human brain, but it just is what it is. We are hardwired to find explanations to questions that we encounter in the world around us. We're not as hardwired to test the validity of those explanations to the phenomenon of the world that we find around us. So when we come into a situation in which we don't know, it's like, why is this happening? Well, I don't know. All right. We as a unit, an organism, we tend to seek explanation to plug in, and then frequently, not always, but frequently, if you're looking at a bell curve of human behavior, once the explanation is plugged in, we move on. What we're most interested in satisfying up here is putting something in that blank spot not necessarily testing whether the something that we put in the blank spot is the correct answer. So what happens if you have faulty data? That becomes the thing that gets clicked into that why is this happening? When you don't have data, the tendency is towards finding something that represents data. So yes, right? If there are incorrect conclusions drawn, and we plug those in, then we move on. And we as thinkers, we tend not to test the assumptions as we move forward. In fact, we have a lot of psychological pre-wired behaviors that discourage us from testing the assumptions. One of them is called the lost investment tendency, and that is, this is how people get taken in scams and things. That once you invest something in an effort, whether it's time or emotion or your physical energy, and it's not working, the tendency is to keep going, saying, well, I've put this much into it so far, I shouldn't waste it. All right, well, what if what you're doing is not going to get you what you want? And you should stop. Okay. Investing more is the waste, not saying, well, I don't want to waste what I've invested. But this is a very powerful psychological facet of how our brain works. So yes, the answer to your question is it is in some instances that poorly interpreted, derived data, all right, is worse, than no data at all. Okay, question number 2. Consider the research you have done concerning backcountry.com and your PR plan for the company's rehabilitation. Formulate a null hypothesis for a proposed action that might be taken as part of the PR plan. Briefly explain how you could test this null hypothesis. Okay, so first and foremost, understand here that a significant part of this question is for you to understand what a null hypothesis is. Because when you get, in any field, research or otherwise, you got to know the jargon, because people are not going to stop and explain what the thingy means. I mean, every industry has its jargon, and they like to just toss it around. Again, that's another very powerful psychological element of how our brains work. And so you just need to be able to go, it's a null hypothesis, that's what that is. Okay. So the null hypothesis is a statement of no effect, meaning, say back to the ice cream and the sharks, a null hypothesis would be increased sales of ice cream will have no effect on the level of shark encounter in coastal towns in Florida. That would be a null hypothesis. All right, so that's part of what the question is, so you understand this. Valerie, let's take a look at you. Null hypothesis: launching a comprehensive public relations effort centered on brand transparency and community participation will have no meaningful impact on customer confidence in backcountry. Excellent null hypothesis, Valerie. All right, meaning it's not going to make a difference. Now, here's an important point when you're testing a null hypothesis. Your job as a researcher is not to prove the null hypothesis or to disprove the null hypothesis. Your job as a researcher is not to say, well, a public relations campaign along with community participation, community relations, is going to have a meaningful impact on customer confidence in backcountry. Your job is just to test it. And when you launch the PR campaign, when you launch the community relations, whatever the customer perception is what you register in relationship to the null hypothesis. What do I mean by that? So let's say that you launched the PR campaign and some community relations to go along with it. And then you started taking surveys of customer attitudes towards backcountry. And you'd taken a survey before you launched the campaign, so you have a baseline. This is what people think now. And then you take a survey after you launch the campaign. This is what people think afterwards. If people's perception and approval of backcountry goes up, then this disproves the null hypothesis. But what if people's perception and approval and attitudes towards backcountry goes down? What if they go, oh yeah, now they're just trying to make up for the fact that they shut down all of these other little entities that had the name backcountry in it. We ain't buying it. What they're trying to do is just sell us stuff. They really don't care about these organizations, because if they did, they would do blah 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 blah. And the net effect was a decline in public approval of backcountry. That too would negate the null hypothesis, just not in a direction that the company is going to want to hear about. But that's your job, is to test the null hypothesis. Okay, Valerie, let's go back to your answer here. To test the null hypothesis, give a pre-test, post-test. Excuse me, you wrote it fine. I'm mumbling it. Pre-test, post-test quantitative survey to sample Backcountry.com's target consumers. The poll would assess consumer trust levels before running the PR campaign, and again after the PR campaign had run for a certain amount of time. Whatever, 3 months, or what you do is you take a look at best practices as to how long after a PR campaign you could expect public sentiment to change to a level that you could measure it. Okay, well, how would you measure it, Valerie? You mentioned Likert scale questions on brand integrity, consumer happiness, community involvement may be included in the survey. Okay, excellent answer. For those of you that don't know, what is a Likert scale? Well, it was named after the individual Likert who came up with it. It's frequently used in quantitative research. I think we've covered this, but just as a reminder, Likert scale are really good for measuring the range of things, because they're, especially in human behavior, things tend not, in human behavior, things tend not to happen in a bipolar manner. It's simply yes or no. It's on a spectrum. It's on a scale in human behavior. All right, so how people feel about things, there's some subtlety to it. So a Likert scale always has an odd number of response options for the survey taker, and usually goes something like, please respond to the following statements. And then there's a statement. The statement could be, I believe, backcountry cares about the outdoor community. That would be the statement. And then the Likert scale would start with, and it's like 5 or 7 or 9. 5 I find is adequate. So it would be like, here's the statement. Backcountry cares about the outdoor community. Likert scale response. And you would list this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Strongly disagree. Disagree. I got no opinion. I have no idea. Agree. Strongly agree. All right. You give the respondent an option on this scale as to how they feel. Using that data, you could measure the impact pre and post survey. Valerie, excellent answer. That's exactly what we're looking for, and you nailed what a null hypothesis is. Okay, question number 3. Consider the 6 strengths of quantitative research listed in the article that you read. Of these, which one of the 6 do you believe has the potential to most positively impact good, informative PR research and planning? Briefly explain. Hillary, let's take you. Limbless generalizability, hypothesis testing, causality, standardization, scalability, speed, objectivity, and reproducibility as the top strengths of quantitative research. I believe that generalizability, or we can say generalization, is the most potent, has the most potential to positively impact effective PR research and planning, because researchers can apply their results to a larger population. Okay, excellent answer, Hillary. Here's why that is an excellent answer. When you're doing research, unless your focus is just those that you're researching on. So, let's say that you're in a school district and the school is rolling out new policies for what books end up in the library. All right. And you're really not concerned with what every parent in every school district across the nation feels about books in school libraries. You're just concerned with what these parents in this school feel about books in this library. Unless your research is focused on that specific target, you're concerned with the general population. You do not have time, money, and resources to poll the general population. You may not even have time, money, and resources to poll all of the people in a school. All right, let's, depending on how big it is, maybe you got a couple of thousand parents and that's all the parents. Okay. But in the instances, which is the majority of the case, you don't have time, money, and resources to poll everybody. You have to be able to produce results that are accurate and can be generalized to the larger populace. To say, okay, our test groups think this, and because of our solid methodology, we could generalize this to the general population. So when you're dealing with somebody like Backcountry, since you cannot create PR research that has surveyed everybody in the outdoor community, make sure that your methodology is sound enough that your results can be generalized to the larger community. And that is definitely a strength of quantitative research. Good answer, Hillary. Okay. I gave you a bonus question. You didn't have to answer this. I've been throwing a few bonus questions in here, there throughout the semester, give you a little extra points. I think I said in the video, in the article that I wrote, this is not me trying to convince you, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. That's not why I asked you to read that, or I gave that to you as a bonus. The reason that I gave that to you as a bonus is what I want to show you is how you apply the things that you're learning here to PR. This was a PR piece. I wrote it. I wrote it for a specific platform. I presented it on a media platform to a couple million viewers. Not bad. Because I wanted to inform the public, especially parents, you get that from the article, about what it is that they are and are not getting as part of their decision-making process. And now, and if you read the article, you get that I sympathize with them in the decision-making process. All right, because it's tough when you're a parent. You worry about a lot of things, and although articles, newsy bits tend to end with the obligatory and just do this and everything's gonna be fine. That's not what you find in this article, because they don't get to the end and say, well, just do this and everything's gonna be fine. All right, that's not the point. Okay, and you don't have to agree that people should know this or don't know this. That wasn't the point. What I wanted you to do is to take a look at some of the very real life shortcomings in how data is processed and presented that impacts the public's ability to make a decision, which is at the heart of PR. Okay, what you're trying to do is impact their ability to make a decision. Okay, so the question went in the piece on children and vaccination. I highlight some quantitative research shortcomings with how the numbers for vaccine harms versus vaccine benefits are reported to the public. Of those shortcomings, which one do you believe has the potential to negatively affect the public's ability to make informed decisions about whether or not to receive a particular vaccine? Okay, let's see, who haven't we taken here? Elisa, let's take you. Okay. Gardner 2025 highlights research shortcomings with how data on vaccine harm and vaccine benefits are reported to the public. According to the article, data suggesting disease prevention from vaccine is more vigorously collected. Yeah, it's just more, it's more actively vacuumed up. I might put it that way too. Then data on vaccine injury. Additionally, the voluntary nature of the virus reporting makes it difficult to link side effects to vaccines and creates a backlog in processing the reported events. This combination contributes to an understanding of potential vaccine. An underestimation, excuse me, you wrote that right. I read it wrong. Of vaccine harms. That creates an inflated sense of vaccine efficacy. The example Gardner provided was a 10-year-old boy. Highlights how a lack of follow-up can lead to cases being viewed as successes, even if the disease was still contracted, because we know there was a high rate of breakthrough infection and then there was a high rate of asymptomatic infection. As people had it, but they didn't even know they had it. People vaccinated and they got it anyway. Okay. While the everyone included approach to calculating harm versus benefit is flawed, it negatively impacted informed decision making for the public. Without accurate and comprehensive data on potential harms compared to successes, individuals cannot truly make informed decisions for themselves, especially when confronted with the pressures to fall in line with global public safety standards that could protect the population. Okay, excellent. So you could have picked either one of those two of the major quantitative shortcomings. Number one, the failure to stratify the reporting on the data. And then number two, the lopsidedness of the reports of what is a success as opposed to the the bottlenecking on reporting what's a failure. All right, this impacts someone's decisions. Now, you notice, excuse me, that I did not say in this article that these quantitative shortcomings make vaccines dangerous. Okay, that's not my point. Okay, the question is here, what sort of information is someone getting that allows them to make an informed an autonomous decision, which is something that is an obligation when you get into public relations. Unless you work in a totalitarian state and you're trying to convince everybody that Vladimir is just the candidate for for now the 20 whatever this will be of his presidency, 23rd or 25th year as president of the Russian Republic, and he's gonna get the election anyway. Okay, you're trying to give people information that will allow them to make an informed decision. First and foremost being, do they understand? Do they really feel that they have the information they need to make that decision? And when that is lacking, that's a problem for the entity that you're representing, especially now, because we live in a data-rich world, and I didn't discover these quantitative shortcomings. They're right there, and a number of people were already discussing them. I simply brought them together and said, hey, if there are people saying, I'm not so sure about these vaccines, it's not because they're whack jobs. It's because they are looking at this from the perspective of, I really need both sides of the data to make an informed decision, which is what PR should do. And it's, as the old expression goes, when you ignore the elephant in the room, people wonder if you're trying to hide something. I'm not saying that people in the vaccine industry are trying to hide things. At least in this article, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that when they ignore these obvious shortcomings, this undercuts their goal. What's their goal? Their goal is to establish maximum public compliance, maximum levels of vaccination. That's their goal. Now, do I agree or disagree with their goal? That's not the point. The point is that on the way to achieving their goal, a failure to address these glaring quantitative deficiencies undercuts their goal. And I say that in the article. You do not have to be a researcher or a statistician to know that when you pump up the numbers for success, and it's baked into the system, and then you push down the numbers for failure, this is a lopsided picture, and people are going to catch on, and they're going to go, yeah, and maybe there's nothing to hide. And maybe everything is perfectly fine and safe. That's not the point. All right? It's the public perception. It's like back to Bud Light. Having Dylan Mulvaney, a guy who's convinced, or I can't say because I've never talked to him, but who portrays that he's convinced that he is a girl, which he's not, in a bathtub, lip syncing along to some song, drinking a Bud Light. That in itself is not going to make anybody that opens up and drink a Bud Light, it's not going to transform them into someone who is a guy but then thinks he's a girl. They didn't change the formula in Bud Light. That's not the point. The point is the association of the image with the product. Okay? So it's not whether Bud Light tastes any different or whatever it's supposed to do as a light beer. And I wrote about this when this first came out, and I thought, I'm really, I mean, me personally, I'm really not concerned with what my no flavor beverage does, or who represents my no flavor beverage, because I don't drink it. It's the same reason I don't drink diet soda. I think there are dissertations being written for anthropology students, 50, 100 years down the road, to try to explain the billion dollar industry that is the diet soda industry for a drink that has no nutritive value, zero, zippo, doesn't even says so on the can. It has no nutritive value, and because of a high sodium content, actually is contrary to the hydration effects that one desires when one takes in a liquid. Strange to me. But anyway, um, that's not what was going on. That was not the problem. So it's not about efficacy, whether this beer is going to make you into a Dylan Mulvaney or not, or this vaccine is going to harm you. It's about informed consent for the public. And when you don't have that, again, back to what we said before, people like to plug in. When they have a blank spot, like I don't know why this is, they will plug in explanations. I don't know why the level of reported success is so high and the level of reported failure is so low. Plug in explanation. And frequently, what they plug in, because it's a simple explanation, is they must be trying to hide something. Well, maybe they are, maybe they're not. Okay? Okay, so that was what I wanted you to take away from that. All right. All right, everybody. Keep on keeping on with that fourth PR plan. I'll get to your drafts this week so you get some feedback prior to having to do that final assignment. Get back in there and start reviewing those discussion questions. If you have any left on the table from 10 forward, get in there and get them done, because I'll give you the option to get the points, and don't leave the points lying on the table. Easy points. Okay. And I am in my office this week, so if you have anything that you want to cover as we come down to the end of the semester, please contact me. I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to be back with you. While I was gone, I was thinking about you. I was praying about you. And for the final 3 weeks that we have left, I'll see you on Canvas. God bless. Bye-bye.